we're going to continue now. We've currently got about 40 people with us. I'm Linda Law, for those of you who don't know me, and I'm the Executive Director of the HoloCenter and the founder of the Virtual Museum of Holography. And we're here today to celebrate the lives of Fred Unterseher and Becky Deem, who we've been joined here by many of Fred's friends here. And I'm gonna have to ask you to, all of you on my panel, to just turn off your microphones, because I can't right now until you're gonna speak.
It's Francesco.
Yeah,
Okay.
It's Francesco.
Okay, so if you could turn off your microphones, everybody, please. And so we're going to have a unique celebration here today with many of Fred's friends from around the world who are going to share with you his work, and Becky Deem, his partner's work. And we're going to take you on a journey through his life, told by stories from his friends. So I actually met Fred in the early 80s when he was in New York at the Museum of Holography, and I actually knew Becky before I knew Fred, and although I knew of Fred. And Fred worked with us when I was at New York Institute of Technology in the Center for Optics, Lasers, and Holography. And he worked with us part-time while he was actually at the museum. And that's my most concentrated time of knowing Fred. I would like to add that I'm not really going to talk much because there's so many people here that knew him much better than I did, who've got some amazing stories for you. And as I've been putting together presentation for this today with all the slides, I've seen a whole load more work of both of them that has totally blown me away. And hopefully in the future, we will be showing more of their work and getting exhibitions where they can be seen, because this is really beautiful work. So we're going to kick this off to begin with here with August Muth, who, and I'm going to do screen sharing so that you can see the slides. And I'm going to attempt to set that in motion here. And also going to put up the chat here. We've got quite a few people that are now sending little messages in. I would just like to add, if you've got questions, can you put them in the chat and I will read them out at the end. So let me set the screen share going. This is always something, here we go. And if I can get this. I have to go into full screen. Okay, so here we go. And I can see you, Augie. So if you, hang on a minute, you can see your window on the side here. When you want me to advance to the next slide, just put your hand up, or put your finger up. You're gonna have to, yeah.
Like that, okay.
I don't have a full window of you. They're squished a little bit, so keep your hand up. Okay, got it.
I'll put it there like this. That'll work.
So,
okay, so,
and this, let me see if I can just give me 1 minute here to get rid of that bar. I won't, no, that wasn't it.
That one you put. The ones, it'll be with your name. Okay.
Sorry, it's not doing its thing. I'm just giving.
There was something on there that said hide toolbar down at the bottom.
Next to the last.
There you go.
There should be a view full screen, show full screen. It's not doing it.
You're already in full screen.
Yeah.
Otherwise, yep.
Okay, then I'm.
it's a narrower image, maybe. So.
Yeah. Do you see the whole image?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Great. Great.
Yeah. So you know, I've been friends with Fred since about 1982, met him at the Museum of Holography. And I've been going through he and Becky's belongings over the last couple of months. And I found a collection of Pulse Masters. So here is a Pulse Master of the two of them when they were in Germany together. I thought it was a quite sweet little image. Then go to the next one. And took this one in the studio. And I like this a lot too. Becky is bent down looking into a large collimating mirror. So as I was going through their things, I found a bio that Fred had written. And because of his dyslexia, I had to sort of translate some of it and reconstruct a bit of it, but I'm going to read it now so you can get a sense of who Fred was. Fred Unterseher has focused his career on art and science/technology. He was born and raised in a small community in Nebraska where he acquired a strong connection to nature. In his early teens, he moved to Southern California, where he developed interest in consciousness and Hindu, Buddhist thought and culture. He complemented his fascination in high technology and the nature of light. He attended and graduated the San Francisco Art Institute in the late 60s and early 70s, a time remembered for political unrest, lifestyle experimentation, and mind expansion. Fred Unterseher studied with Manuel Neri, Fred Destabler, Richard Shaw, and Fletcher Benton. While in the Bay Area, Fred participated in the formation of a number of cooperative artist living projects, including Project Artaud, Project One, and the Emeryville Artist Co-op. From 1969 to 71, he was a member of Ant Farm, an art media collective famous for the catalog ranch and media burning. They toured the country, built inflatables, geodesic domes, worked in early video, and were generally irrelevant. In 1971, Fred was among the pioneering members that formed the San Francisco School of Holography with Lloyd Cross and Jerry Pethick at Project One, the first independent school of holography. Fred went on to form Holographic, a art studio and teaching facility where he conceived and co-authored the Holography Handbook, a practical guide to holography that was sold over 6,000 copies in multiple languages. He spent the early 80s in New York City as the director of education at the Museum of Holography, where he developed an artist in residence program that served the art holographers as well as other artists without experience with the medium. The Museum of Holography is also where he met Becky Deem. He and Becky spent 5 years in Europe dealing with both the technical and artistic aspects of holography while working at an independent corporation in Hamburg. He co-founded an artist in residence program there that allowed artists access to the high technology equipment of a 10-joule pulse laser. While in Hamburg, they both explored the holographic content of the human body in their work. In New York and Europe, they co-curated exhibitions and created opportunities for lecture series and dialogue between artists working with conventional as well as highly technical media. On their return to Southern California, they co-founded Zone Holographics, an art studio and teaching facility. In this time period, Fred also taught optical theory and contemporary imaging systems at a graduate program at Brooks Institute of Photography and at Pasadena City College. It was at Brooks that he participated as a team member of the first holographic portrait of a US president, Ronald Reagan, now in the Smithsonian Portrait Collection. In their holographic studio in North Hollywood, they were able to continue their art explorations with a smaller 1-joule pulse laser. Fred continued to consult for SBIR projects involving 3D imaging systems for NASA and JPL holographic audio graphic screens. They left Southern California in 2004 to teach in an optics program in Columbia, Missouri. In 2007, Becky and Fred moved to Santa Fe, New Mexico. Oops, hold on there a second. To be closer to August Muth's holographic studio and also to be close to their longtime friend, Ana MacArthur. They were able to construct their own holographic studio to explore the art of holography and optical holographic systems. While in Santa Fe, they both worked with August Muth to produce a number of artworks. Their artworks have been shown in museums, institutions, and galleries worldwide. Fred's interests included art, science, light, kinetics, consciousness, and community, which he expressed by mixing holography with other media. He viewed art as a condition that enhances and expands the transformation of personal experience. And, you know, that I think is, those last two sentences were really important for who Fred was. And next photograph. So this is Fred sort of conducting school, in essence. You know, he would come to my studio often and help people who came to visit the studio here in Santa Fe with understanding holography. This is Dora Toss from Italy. She has visited studio a number of times. Next photograph. Here's a photograph of, well, Fred, Guillermo Hines standing, Michael Crawford sitting, and Dora again. This is all from 2012 when after the MIT conference, I invited a number of people, these three people, to come to the studio and make holograms for about 3 weeks. So we had a great time. Fred was very involved in just the whole interaction of how we see light, which was his main quest in life. Next photograph. So this is a photograph from early San Francisco, Fred. This is a photograph of the inflatables that he was doing. This is a figure with, it was in one of these inflatables with Ant Farm. Next photograph. Here's another photograph of the Ant Farm experiments with the inflatables. He felt a true affinity for this period in his life and the interaction with numerous people creating these wonderful pieces of work that traveled the world. Next photograph. So this is some of the work that came out of his time in Germany with pulse portraits. This piece is entitled Sisters, and these two models that were, he made a pulse hologram of, they were two sisters that he really enjoyed making many pulse masters from. I've probably gone through a number of his masters at this point, not all of them, and there's 30 probably masters of these two sisters. Next photograph. I believe this is a photograph of Becky, a hologram, sorry, of Becky. And this also came out of their German experience. Not sure of the name of it.
Sorry.
And these are next photograph. This is the interest of Fred. He was, for some reason I am blanking on the name of this artist photographer who did all this research with
Muybridge.
Yes.
Oh, Muybridge.
Yes, and so he was very influenced by this, and we often talked about this, on almost a monthly basis. We would sort of review his interest in this. Next photograph. Nude descending a staircase, Duchamp. He was very interested, in this, and this was another example of his interest. Next photograph. This is actually Duchamp photographed descending a staircase. So these three things that really influenced Fred's artwork throughout his entire holographic career. Next This is another one of the pieces that came out of the Germany time, and I don't know exactly if they produced this in Germany or if they produced it in California. Next photograph. This is another one of that series, and Fred combined and sort of collage many different images and holograms together to form individual unique pieces. This is an example of that. This is Nina Hagen. He did a pulse hologram of her while they were in Germany. He had a great experience with Nina for 4 or 5 days, and it's something he talked about often. Next photograph. This is Nina and her boyfriend from that period in the 80s, very punk. And it's a great hologram. I really enjoy this piece. Next. So this is the series of kinetic mandalas that Fred did. And basically this is a series of holograms that are produced by just making holograms of light in space through a composite of lenses that he would construct. So there would be many lenses that he would shine laser light through to sort of create these 3-dimensional light forms in space and then make a hologram of them. And this is an area that I really enjoyed of his work, and that we also explored at my studio here in Santa Fe. And so there'll just be a number of photographs here. Yeah, we'll just go through them to give you a sense of, as you move around them, they're extremely colorful and they change their character quite a bit as you move around them. This was one we did at my studio in dichromate. Next one. This is another series. So this piece and the next 2 photographs, they are all the same hologram as you move around it, and the color dynamic change in them is quite amazing. And also the lines going through these holograms are very dimensional. So they're off the surface of the hologram by 8-10 inches, something like that. So they're very kinetic and dynamic. Next image. So this is just another view of another one of his pieces. He did some things that were very simple. This one, as you move around it, that white form in the middle of it sort of rotated in a sense, and was very optically dynamic. Next piece. The next 2 photographs are sort of as you move around the same piece. So this is from one view, and the next image is from another view. And so that those sort of light feathers that are above the piece would move across the top of the piece as you moved around it. Next image. So this is sort of where he based it all. This is a very simple piece, kinetic mandala he did, that is basically just mixing of colors in very simple, just 3 round forms that had a feeling of a dimensional spherical space. All right, next. So this is a piece that he did in Santa Fe in about 2008 for an exhibition. It's about where you are in space. It's another, once again, I forgot the title of it, but it will come up later because we worked on another piece like this with him later on that C. Alex, Clark, who will be presenting later, will probably talk about. So this is basically, it's a bamboo structure, and the hologram was on the ground, and then there was a little plumb bob that swung right above the hologram, and it was referenced at about 85 degrees so that you could see it all around as you walked around the piece. Next image. You can go get a sense of it here. So there was, it was very graphic. The circle in the hologram was projected up about 8 or 9 inches off the surface. And as the plumb bobs moved around, it would basically form, a dimensional place in space. So he was very interested in that. Next image. So this is an image of a piece that, that I did with C. Alex Clark at my studio for Fred, and Fred was involved here almost every day. This was for the Holographic Foundation, and we did a series of 4 of these pieces. They're rainbow transmission holograms, and Fred was using masters that he produced in Germany in the 80s. And we were layering different parts of each master on top of one another. And as you move left and right across this hologram, there's a lot of movement and changing of body position. And it's a really elegant piece. I like this quite a bit. And that's what I put together. I miss Fred a great deal, and he will influence my life for the rest of my life. Here we go.
Thank you, Augie. Amazing, amazing work. And up next, we have Ana MacArthur, who's going to speak to us about Becky's work and Becky's life. So Ana, if I start you off whenever you're ready, if you want to introduce, and then tell me when you want to start me to start.
Okay, you can go to the first image. You can hear me, I assume. Yeah, nice to see a beautiful series of Fred's work, by the way, and hear the history over again, which I've heard for years. So I met Fred and Becky when I was employed at the Museum of Holography in 1983. That date is vague if it's 82 or 83, because I was volunteering at the museum over the course of many months until I was hired. So I can't remember if it was 82 volunteering, but 83 I was employed in the bookstore, which also involved education. And that's how I met Fred first, and then Becky, but it merges because I always remember them hanging out at the museum as a couple. And then there were all these great exhibitions. As Augie relayed, we knew them over the years. And it'll come up in my slideshow here. What I want to do is, this is chronologically ordered, sort of beginning to the last years of Becky's life with her artwork interspersed. So you get the story of her, their life, and the artwork. And eventually they lived 2 doors away from me for a while when they moved to Santa Fe. So this is Becky as a teenager, beautiful photo. She was born in 1949 in Vincennes, Indiana. And it's interesting because she always talked about this farm, so did Fred. And I believe what really came into her work was doing a lot of handwork. She was doing, at the time when she got her degree, bachelor's in science, but art degrees had different titles then. It was 1972 Indiana State University in Terre Haute, Indiana. And it was a degree partly also in art therapy, and she worked as a therapist as well, art therapist, as well as teaching art to young people. She talks about in one of her interviews for a show that we were in together that her early painting textile work, there was a lot of textile work, which came out of a history of quilting in her family. And it was the nap in the fine fabric she used that had an optical effect when you moved around it. That was kind of a precursor to becoming interested in holography. You can go to the next photo, Linda. So this is jumping ahead date-wise, but it's a great photo thinking of Becky as her own independent person before she met Fred. She then got introduced, next slide. Well, she first learned about holography from a Life magazine article that came out in 1972 or 73. And then she saw an exhibition in Chicago on a tour, I think in her schooling, of holograms, and was really entranced. Then she moves to New York, and then she takes her first training in 1975 at New York School of Holography. Then she meets Fred in 1983, and it's interesting because that's about when I was working in the bookstore at the museum. And as everyone knows, they were quite the team. Next slide. And it became obvious after a point that they were quite the couple. So I always saw them at the museum and installing shows, of course, Fred setting up the AIR. All right, next slide. Now I'm going to jump into Becky's work, and to make a point, this is one of her most amazing pieces, probably my favorite. I think Sally will talk about it as well, called Venus. And it was made in 1979. So there's a series of works here, and this is before she met Fred. It's one of 3 works in a series called Holus Bolus, which means all at once. And it means that all space and time are unified at once. So you'll see the 3 I'll show you have interlinks and connections. But this is a brilliant work. There's a history in art of Venus and Venus work. And of course, it means a lot to women. I think if you put this piece alongside of other Venus works, it would just stand out as really interesting in historical time. It's a reflection hologram. It's a rhombohedron. And so the front part that you're seeing first is the plane of the hologram. And it's of a translucent cylinder. And when you move around it, next slide. Oh, we missed a slide. Uh-oh. Somehow the second slide didn't get in. Well, I'll talk through.
Is that it?
No, it's not, but just go back to the first Venus. So you get to see the side, and there's a hole carved in the glass in the back, so you can stick your finger in, but that physical hole kind of helps form seeing this beautiful cylinder. And of course, the cylinder or void at this time, I know this because I was in New York, and it certainly was an influence in ways on my own artwork of women really rediscovering prehistory and things like the Venus of Willendorf. And so you can go to the next slide now. And there's a whole history of awareness about internal spaces and voids representing women, the projectile representing men. Becky talked about the Venus work, and she emphasized that it's not male or female, but celebrates creativity as a form of unification, the interconnection between all acts. And she did have an interest in prehistoric work. Let's see, I think we'll go to the next slide. Okay, this is in the same series, Holus Bolus, and it's called, I put all the titles up because Becky's work is beautifully conceptual. And you can see it even in her writing and the titles of her work. So this one, Revolve, or R equals Evolve, is about revolve equaling evolve, or revolution equaling evolution. And this concept comes into her later work even. So it's, again, she's using the same hologram, but recontextualizing it. And this time, instead of being on a like 19th century old-fashioned sculpture stand, which is Venus is on, referencing sculpture, but putting in this new form called holography that deals with where we're going in the future and is light itself. On that sculpture stand, you have the Venus light. On this painting easel, you have, again, a reference. It's all in light, but you're referencing the history of painting. So it's on an angle, but that hologram you're looking at, again, it's the translucent cylindrical tube reflection hologram, but it's out on these little bars, so you can spin the hologram, and at one view see the virtual, which for those who don't know holography, you have the holographic plane and the image is behind the plane. You can flip it and see the pseudoscopic, the image comes out in front. And so she's very interested in the idea that you could have a painting where both the front and the back of the painting have content and meaning. And it's working with the idea that there's movement and it leads to change and growth. So she brings this up later on, revolution equals evolution or growth. Next slide. And these are it on the pseudoscopic and the virtual side. Next slide. So this is the next one in the series called Whole Message. You could say with whole message or whole message. And she's working with the idea that whole is actually also represents that represents emptiness. There's nothing in the whole. So you have whole means complete. She's working with the pun of hologram, which is essentially whole writing, or whole, holos meaning whole, gram meaning writing. And so it's a complete message, or it's also complete emptiness, meaning referring to the whole. Now this one is up on an arm, or it's also a antenna. It's a spring mounted antenna. So you can look at the virtual side. There's a little way to twist the hologram, flip it over, look at the pseudoscopic, or you can see it walking around front to back, or you can pull the arm, which is an antenna, and next slide, please. And it reverbs and you get a blurred image. You know, Becky writes that you can contrast the blurry kinetic image to the still image where one sees a black hole. So there's emptiness embedded in, there's the whole experience is created. There's emptiness embedded in this, but the whole experience is created only in the mind. She wrote that referencing this piece. I want to add for myself, when I saw this work and Venus at the museum, Becky's work stood out because she was really working with the dematerialization of holography, where some people were fascinated by reconstructing a three-dimensional image. Next slide. Then this one, personally, I know intimately because when Becky had an AIR and I was working at the museum, Augie and I had met, and Becky and Fred invited us both, probably at different times, but same time, to work on our own work in the museum. So it was during Becky making roto relief, one version of it, that I made my very first silver holograms. So I intimately can see her with her object, that she was using to make these holograms. And it was ball bearings on a black funnel. I'll say in a minute how this references Duchamp. So she made these reflection holograms and used the pseudoscopic side and put it on a turntable. And when you spin, those bright points of light of the ball bearings would blur. You can do the next slide, Linda. That actually, she had the date of 1981. So she was doing this really before she met Fred, but it was 1983 that I was down in the basement when she was making this. And she put both of those dates on there. They were a series that she did called Roto Relief. And on some of them, she marks homage to Marcel Duchamp's rotos. Becky, the moment I met her and got to know her in New York, she was always talking about Duchamp. And I respected and got that because I too had read a lot and was very blown away by Duchamp and his conceptual mind. I think it's particularly unique of her to have referenced Duchamp's rotos and brought this in. Next slide. So in 1935, Duchamp made these double-sided discs that had images on either side that were to be spun on a turntable at specific RPMs. And he was really interested in the optical illusion that would take place. He sold these at inventors fairs. And he also collaborated with Man Ray, and they made a film, Anemic Cinema. And I found something about this in Becky's archives. He was very interested in creating the illusion of depth. So again, it's brilliant of Becky to have drawn off of that work. And as Augie brought up, Fred had this interest in Duchamp, but all the years of being around both Fred and Becky, Becky was the one who talked extensively about Duchamp. And I think couples influence each other. I think that influence came to Fred because of Nude Descending Staircase and the work he did with the body later, but I really credit Becky to calling up Duchamp into sort of the holographic work. Next slide. And I'll say at this time, I'm going chronologically, when they were in New York together, Becky also ran a jewelry company called Red, her initials, Rebecca Ellen Deem. And it was working with holographic diffraction grating. I actually work here in honor of her. So I want to just say before I hit the next chapter, which is going to Europe, that, you know, Becky early on was underway with beautifully, deeply conceptual holographic artwork and interested in issues of perception and seeing and feminism. This is the lab I found in Becky's archives. I don't know if Augie saw this, but I was blown away. A little notebook of Polaroids of the lab in Germany. And I had never seen, I had an image in my head of the lab thinking that the big table was as big as the table in the lab Augie and I had here in Santa Fe. This is about 8 foot by 13 foot. But there are multiple tables, as you can see, and multiple lasers. It's pretty impressive. So they moved to Europe in 1985 to work at Holocom GmbH, and it was set up a project sponsored by the German government to develop full color holography. So they were both hired as researchers. Fred as the one who really, you know, knew more about pulse holography. And it gave them this incredible opportunity to work on their own work in pulse. As you saw with Augie's presentation, Becky was a model for Fred, but she was also a model for herself and her own work. And for anyone on the Zoom, if you don't know, to make holograms of the human body, because of the blood moving under the skin, it creates too much movement. You need coherent interference, the intermeshing of the object beam and the reference beam to get any hologram. But the movement of the blood under the skin is too much movement. So you need a pulse laser, which fires at 20 billionths of a second. And Becky writes later on that what she loved about doing this work is because that is such a tight, impulsive timeline, so tight that you often get interesting things due to happenstance that you don't plan. So next slide. And I'm putting some personal things. There's both Fred and Becky in front of lasers at the lab in Germany and a view out the window. So obviously this was sort of in the country. Next slide. And some of the great people Fred and Becky met. Others may know some of those. There's Dieter in the bottom with Fred and Becky. And I think the man that shows up in all of these, I don't know his name, but I think he worked with them in the lab. And I also recognize some models, Augie probably does too, in the top photo for Fred's holograms. Next slide. Okay, so these are works Becky did having access to the lab. Some of the dates are interesting because she made a lot of pulse masters there, as did Fred, and they, over the next series of years, continued to make work from the pulse masters they made at the lab there. It was also set up loosely as an informal AIR, so Melissa Crenshaw and Cindy Dismore came there, and Dieter did, along with the research they were doing for the German government, as well as having access to make their own work. This piece up against it was put together in 1997, but the masters were made during that time. Becky, at this time in Germany, to me, this sort of quality of feminist work comes in because of just incredible struggles with her own health. And I don't know for sure, but I think I remember her saying it was in Germany that she started to realize how serious her diabetes was. Fred was also having his own struggles with health. She makes this very interesting work to me because it's so simple. So she's pressed a glass plate up against her breast and it resonates with women having mammograms. I also think she's sort of in the realm of women who, like Carol Lee Schneemann, performance artists who were using their bodies. Carol Lee's case, sometimes sexually, Becky not so. I think she's really dealing with the female body as a place of sacredness and territory and dealing with gender issues. So she has this pulse hologram with a shadowgram cutout, and she worked with shadowgrams sometimes in her work, but this shadowgram is just of her own body in paper, and then there's a wood pedestal. Becky and I talked a lot, because we're both artists. We were talking a little in New York, but much more once they moved here, about sort of historical movements. And she expressed, as did I, an irritation with a lot of shock value that came into art in the late 90s. And I wanted to bring that up because I think for me, this work is not shock value. It's about bringing kind of intimacy into holographic work. Next slide. In the same realm, another piece, 1987, is she made this Pulse Master when they were in Germany, and it's titled Flipped Out. So it's a pulse hologram with mounted below are some Polaroids and a sketch. It's really hard to read what's in the sketch. I even got my slide projector out and projected, and I just can't read it, except what I can see is down in the lower right is a sketch of one of her earlier works, Revolve. It's the one where the hologram of the cylinder is spinning, so you can see the front and the back, and it refers to revolution and evolution, or growth. So it's interesting, she puts one of her own earlier works in, speaking to the fact that, to me, that she kind of has to accept the hardship that's going on and accept the growth that happens in human life. She's flipping her hair up, but it also, I've never seen this piece physically. And when I first saw a documentation years ago, I saw it as her slapping her face, and she may have said to me something about that. So in essence, when Sally comes on, she might comment if she's seen this, but she's dealing for sure with her health and sort of shocks of what she has to cope with at that time. They went on to work in Raven Holographics in the UK. They had 2 car accidents. Becky got lung damage, and years later, when I was with Fred at the hospital here, she had to have part of her lung removed. Next slide. So here are some wonderful personal photos. Walter Clark in the upper left, upper right, Becky as a teen in the upper left, Fred and Becky possibly in Europe. Next slide. Now, these are also some photos around the same time, and lo and behold, Linda Law in the center, Tom Chekovich, Fred and Becky, Walter Sparings. Next slide. Now we're at the chapter where they leave Germany, leave their wonderful time in Europe, which was 85 to 89. And they stop in and visit Augie and I after we had just kind of finished the first version of our lab in Norwood, Colorado, near Telluride, the lab being finished in 88. So this is possibly, I think it's 1989 they came. And they were using it as a time to just reflect where next. Where they did go was California. They also borrowed my car and went and explored Canyonlands. And Fred brought that up to me 3 days before he died. He was really thinking about that a lot, how much that meant to him. This actual set of photos is Fred, Becky, Augie, and I together bought a pulse laser, and it was housed at their place in LA. So we'd come to visit LA, and we also visited Roberta Booth, who's in the photo, long blonde hair. And we had Jeff Oldham out at the time to work on it, but it was really a struggle. It wasn't in great shape. So that was another holographic chapter of Money Lost. Next slide. So they start their chapter in California. First it was Santa Barbara, then Glendale. And these are works that Becky was kind of putting together then, but I think also exhibited in Columbia, Missouri, where they had a big exhibition. This is a beautiful piece, 3 Modes of Knowing. And she has the dates 1987, 88. And she says pulse work made in Germany. It's referring to the 3 modes of knowing by the Christian mystic tradition. The modes of knowing are eye of flesh, eye of reason, and eye of contemplation, referring to the physical, mental, and spiritual, or the sensory, symbolic, and intuitive. And Becky talked about the spontaneity with pulse lasers. So if you look closely at the book, it's flipped through, you're capturing this pulse moment of time. And it landed on a page that says, I don't know what the book is, but she says the page open to the central, it has on the page, the central root of fear, which I think is really interesting that it landed there. So Becky writes that it's interesting because this has to do with the mind reasoning, but the mind has the capacity to see something as a symbol, like this image of a book, and not only just read about it. Then the eye of contemplation is perfect. This is Becky, and it's a triple channel. On one channel, she's looking to the left, the other channel, she's looking to the right, and then she's looking to the center, like cross-eyed. And by the way, Becky had a wandering eye, so I think those works. You were at the right place, Linda. Just go to that next slide. Yeah, that's the eye of contemplation. So it's one hologram, but I'm showing you 3 views. And the central view, Becky looks cross-eyed. So she writes, this person is able to look away and at themselves at the same time. And it references the spirit, which is undefinable. I also think it's talking about Becky's wandering eye. And then the next slide is the eye of flesh, hands holding water. And we all know you can capture this in a pulse hologram, but as Becky says, it's interesting, the hologram stops in time holding water, but you actually can't physically do that. So it gives the hologram itself a new physicality. Underneath, she had a bucket on the ground. All right, and then next slide. I think it's sort of related because she's using some of the similar holograms. I couldn't find writing on this work, but the title of this installation is Leap of Faith. And I think she's definitely dealing with life changes again. At this time, Fred and Becky both really became obvious starting in Santa Barbara. Augie referenced Fred's spiritual work, which was very deep to him. But Becky too, I think, joined in from that influence, and they were very much a part of Buddhist sanghas. So in Santa Barbara, they had a sangha they went to. In Columbia, Missouri, they loved their sangha especially. And when they moved to Santa Fe, I was practicing Vipassana Buddhism at a sangha here, so they joined my sangha. And this work, those ideas came into the work. So this piece, next slide, Linda, Becky's integrating some of the same holograms, but I think talking about life changes. Next slide. And I'm going to try to speed up because I don't want to take too much more time, but this is an exhibition Becky and I were in together called Leading Lights, and Sally was in it too. A lovely photo was captured of Becky and I hamming it up, and put together by Doug Tyler, St. Mary's College in Notre Dame, Indiana. I think at this point in time, next slide, I'm aware that Becky is starting to really think about geometry in her work. The slide on the left is a great one of Sally and Becky, and it was at the Leading Lights exhibition where we all went to dinner. And I love the photo because Becky, when she went into debate, she could get very intense. And I don't remember what was being said, but I somehow captured Becky in one of those moments. The slide on the right is obviously Augie and Becky, and that's no question at our wonderful Lake Forest meetings that happened every 3 years. Next slide. So these are works, and there's just a couple more of Becky, to me, really intelligently bringing geometry into her work. This one is called Untitled. So there's 4 units on the wall, 4 with holograms integrated, and down below it's shadowed, but there's a conch shell and a Tibetan ringing bowl. I didn't find in her writing how that integrated yet, but I know she's dealing with spiritual topics. These works offer the viewer the opportunity to explore the character of holographic space-time. Each hologram depicts a 4-sided pyramid projecting out, but it's all in light. The holographic plate is the 5th side of the pyramid that completes the solid, in other words, the bottom of the pyramid. She writes, Today in post-historic time, we are constantly challenged by our sense of space and time are constantly challenged. Our physical barriers are challenged. We are faced with ever-changing realities of viewing space and time, which I think is a beautiful statement for what she's trying to do in this work. Next slide, Linda. So here you can see, and she refers to this ovoid shape in the center of the pyramid as akasha at points. And there's lots of slides where you get the different angles of view where you're experiencing the geometry and the pyramid point changing. Next slide. And these are kind of shown in that series, but then she has a separate piece called Inverse Square. I found some writing, but it was a little complex to digest, but she's dealing with the inverse square law and its relationship to light. Next slide. So I'm going to be wrapping it up here. This is the chapter of Fred and Becky moving to Santa Fe, and they worked in the holography lab at this point became Augie's. They worked with Augie a lot to transfer some of their DCG masters into dichromate. They also, Becky was composing some pieces for the New York HoloCenter, the holography ward. And I didn't want to spend time saying a lot about that because there's more writing there. They lived 2 doors down from me. So we were always talking art, talking holography, talking interesting movements in the art, and also talking about Buddhism because we had shared the same Sangha. They were thinking a lot about spiritual interests. And of course, Augie and I were helping them intensely many times with all of their health complications. Becky was also doing a lot more writing then. And she also over the years wrote extensively for holographic journals and a lot of journals that have to do with the holographic industry. And throughout her career, she exhibited her work in England, Germany, Austria, France, and throughout the US. I think Becky took her high-tech holography and brought intimacy to it and some very strong and sharp conceptual ideas. She had a 1981 artist in residence at the Museum of Holography and a 1988 Shearwater Award, which is a holographic award. She helped Fred immensely. Fred and Becky to me were like the reference beam and the object beam. They were so entangled. At times, Becky was the object and Fred as the reference beam helped her support the things she wanted to do. And at other times, Fred was the object and Becky wrote things for him because his dyslexia was so difficult. And she really kind of organized their life at many times. Next slide. And that last slide was a holographic lab they set up just 2 doors away. And I helped them with some projects there, which I'll share another day. This is some of the visitors. There's Guillermo, Augie brought up, who is one of the young holographers that came taught by Augie. And C is leaning into the lower left photo. And Becky and Fred in the lower right would come and share a lot of meals with me. Next slide. So to wrap it up, Fred and I spent some time together. You know, it was lonely for him after Becky wasn't here. In another way, he did really well. So this is the big eclipse in 2019. We went out to Pecos Monument and Fred and I shared a lot of teas at hotels and meals, but it was always fun playing with optics. Next slide. So I'm tying it up with Becky. And as I said, I think she brought really amazing, interesting work to the history of holography and was really quite a rich thinker. And it's impressive to see the very early works. There was one last one. Oh, I don't know how that got stuck in. That's beautiful.
That was a surprise
Becky's
from
got-
Augie.
Okay, that's so sweet. That's fantastic. She's blowing one of those dandelions dried. Really nice. Okay, lovely. And this is my favorite all-time photo of Becky processing holograms. As I say, I loved her as an artist, colleague, a friend, Fred too. We extensively discussed a lot of things and the hardships of life and how artists survive and the whole gamut. So it's an honor to be able to give some little time to her after all those years of hard work. Done.
Thank you, Anna. That was amazing and such a rich spectrum of work from both of them.
Yep.
So we're going to enter another phase now, and we're delighted to have Fred's sister with us, Joanne Simmons, and she found some wonderful images from Fred in his youth. So I'm going to hand it over to you, Joanne.
Oh.
So hi.
Okay. Do you hear me okay?
We hear you great. Thank you.
This is Fred as a baby. I think he's probably between 6 months and 9 months, around there. And he was a cute little guy. This is another picture of him a little bit older. Okay, you can next slide. This is him in school, probably about 7 or 8, I would think. Okay, next slide. This is our family. My mom and dad are in the back, and I'm in the center, and Fred is right in front of me. And to the right of me is our brother Rich, and to my left is our brother Gary. And oh, this is Fred's graduation from high school picture. He graduated from Santa Barbara High School in 1964, I think.
Yeah, go ahead.
And this is Fred with his surfboard. And this is one of the homes that my mom and dad lived in Santa Barbara.
I love this picture.
Me too. This is all. I'm Angie. I'm Fred's niece. I always thought this was a great picture, and the last time I talked to Fred before he went, he mentioned something about surfing, and so I wanted to make sure I included this one. But this was always one of my favorite pictures of him.
That's something Fred and I had in common with surfing. We're both dryland frustrated surfers.
Where did you do your surfing, Augie?
California, I've
were in
surfed Santa
California.
Barbara, Rincon, some of the same places that he surfed.
All right.
So, he actually requested that some of his ashes go out there. So that will be a trip in the future here once travel.
Okay, you're still planning on doing that then?
Oh yeah, paddle out and put some of his ashes at Rincon. That's where he wanted to put them. So
I think I remember him.
Okay.
So
All right.
slide.
Next slide. Oh, this is me and my 3 brothers.
Later on.
I am 14 years older than Fred, so he was my little brother. Yeah, the rest of us, there's me and then Gary and then Rich and then Fred. And I turned 14 the 15 days after Fred was born. So
Quite a bit older. So, next slide.
so he's our little Freddie. Oh, there's Becky. That is not my slide.
I included this because I thought that was a especially nice picture of Becky right after she first met Fred. So it would have been early 80s. So, and then there was one more. Did we have one more picture?
Yes.
Yeah. That was at my grandpa's house. That's right when they first met too.
And that's in Santa Barbara.
Yeah, that picture's taken in Santa Barbara. That's right after they first met.
Well, they lived with my dad for a while before my dad passed away. That would have been in the early 90s, I believe, because he died in 1992.
Anyway, that's all we have.
That's it.
So,
Thank you so much. That adds a whole another perspective on Fred that most of us have not seen. So thank you so much.
welcome.
And next up, we're working chronologically through Fred's life, and I have Gary Sellerbach with us, who's going to talk about some of those early days in San Francisco.
Great. Hello, everyone. Many of you I haven't seen in 30 years or so. So hello. It's sorry, it's a sad occasion for us to all get together, but maybe as the virtual Museum of Holography grows, we can keep some gatherings happening and get to know each other again, except because we don't want to just wait for people to have memorials to get together. So I decided to open a hologram business in California and San Francisco in 1978. And I started going around. I found a very lively community here, quite surprising. I didn't realize we were quite the hub that we were. So I started meeting people, and they loved meeting me because here was a new guy with a pocket full of cash going around buying holograms. And 10 years later, when I was in the hologram business, I loved people like that. So I got a very warm reception wherever I went. I took the class that Sharon McCormick and Lloyd Cross gave at the School of Holography. And I started meeting Multiplex Company, and then I found my way to Fred and his lab, so we could move on. So Fred had two companies when I met him. They were in Emeryville, California, which is a small town, first place over the Bay Bridge. When you come from San Francisco, you land in Emeryville. It's kind of surrounded by Oakland. At the time, Fred's studio was in a warehouse that I guess had been converted into artist lofts. I do recall Jim Farrow being there, and I haven't seen him in a really long time. And so I used to go out there quite a bit, and I used to buy a lot of Fred's dichromate holograms. I think Bob Schlesinger was his partner at that time. Here's one of his early price lists. I was buying holograms from everyone, everywhere, and I have a lot of this ephemera, which hopefully will find a home someday, and we can move on. Here's some pictures of the holograms. The Nautilus shell was really a beautiful image that I always loved. I had one on my desk.
Got it. It's right over there.
Had it on my desk for 30 years, and then it did what some dichromates do that we'll leave unsaid, but I loved it while it lasted. Next. Here are some of the pendants they made. I was selling all this stuff in my gallery. There were some very popular images, and I guess this was kind of bread and butter in the early days for trying to make a living as a holographer. And we'll keep going here. That's a picture of Fred at Lake Forest in 1982 at the first conference. I met a lot of you there for the first time, and I think he's talking about how to make dichromates. This is the picture of Fred from the Holography Handbook, which was really a seminal publication. Franz Ross was around his lab all the time. He ran Ross Publishing, which published the Holography Handbook. And hey, got some nice costumes going there. Next. This is the most angelic picture of me ever taken. I'm really not that angelic. I did have a lot more hair back then. And really, I wanted to show the nice images of Fred's down at the bottom there. So it's more about those than me. But I've always found this picture humorous. Next. And Fred also, as mentioned, had a school of holography at the same location in Emeryville. It was called Holographics to separate itself from the dichromate company. And he was a very good teacher. I took the class. I found him patient, very knowledgeable, and I learned a lot from Fred. And here's the famous Holography Handbook, Fred, Janine Hansen, and Bob Schlesinger. That was a big seller in my gallery, and I think a lot of people went on and learned how to make holograms from that. And here we are in the Holos Gallery, my gallery in San Francisco on Haight Street from 1979. I sold it in 1990. And that's John Kaufman on the left, me in the middle, and Fred reading something on the right there, and we can see all the dichromates. I also came back to my memory about Becky's jewelry and red, and I sold a lot of that. I sold a lot of Augie's jewelry during these days. And I also exhibited some of Fred's art because we had rotating art shows. I had his kinetic mandala up on the wall quite a bit. And so that's a little insight into Fred's early business ventures and trying to survive making holograms. He was a great guy. He was really easy to do business with. I'm sorry I didn't stay in better touch with him in his later years, but this is a nice opportunity for me to catch up. And I appreciate you all being here and helping share our memories of Fred and Becky. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. That was a wonderful view of that period of time. So we're going to continue with California with Peter Miller, because Peter was there, and I'll let him tell his story here. So hi, Peter. We have to unmute you. Here we go. You're muted at the moment. You have to unmute your microphone. Okay, you're still muted. So we can.
Got it.
Oops. Sorry, it happened. Oops.
Can you hear me?
I hear you now. I've lost your image.
All right.
No, I got you back. Good.
All right. Well, hi, everybody. I'm glad to be here to celebrate the life and legacy of Fred and Becky. And Linda, I'd like to thank you for putting on this great presentation here. And you're doing a great job at the museum, by the way, directing it.
Thank you.
The other ones I'd like to really thank would be the friends of Fred who supported him, especially as in recent times. And Augie and Anna, Fred used to call you his angels. So you did a great job, and we're very grateful for that. I met Fred in it would have been late 1978 or 79. He was an extraordinary guy, and he changed my life pretty much forever. Because of him, he set a trajectory that helped me go through my career in holography and continue on till this very day. He lived in Berkeley. Well, I lived in Berkeley, and I was at the time I was doing a lot of photographic work. I had exhibitions in galleries, and I was doing work for bands in the area, photographing them. And then one day I opened up the yellow pages of the phone book, and I saw this ad, and it said, make your own holograms, holographics, products and classes. And I said, wow, I saw one hologram at the Smithsonian, and it impressed me. It was one of Emmett Leith's. And so I looked at this and I said, okay, well, maybe I ought to give him a call. So I did. I called up Fred, and I asked him about his classes, and he said, what you want to do is go over and see Gary Zellerbach. He said, go to the Holos Gallery and see what you're in for. So I did that and went to the gallery, and very impressive. Gary, I think you had a group show of Bay Area holographers, and I said, man, this is incredible. So I went and signed up for Fred's classes. And what impressed me is that he advertises his class as being a simple way to make holograms. Well, his motto is KISS, KISS. Of course, we all know that stands for keep it simple, stupid. And so that was a great motto, because it was able to learn holography, and he taught it in an expert way. What he did is he started up all his classes by asking a simple question, and that is, what is light?
And then he would go further and then say, what's energy? You know, and the question wasn't so simple because he really didn't even know the answer. But he taught in a way which was, he taught in a way that engaged the Socratic way, engaged the viewer or the student. And he did a wonderful job at that. You know, he exemplified that. And he was very enthusiastic. And he shared with us, of course, his ideas of holocosmology and the holographic universe, the brain, what is real, you know, the nature of reality. And of course, if you lived in Berkeley at the time, the nature of reality was sort of like a moving target. Well, he, in his first class, we took, we would do simple Denshuk images. And it'd be single beam holograms. And then from there, it was, I was still intrigued with it. So I took the advanced course, and of course we worked on the sand table. And after a period of time, Fred asked me to help teach courses in return for table time to work on my own artwork. And well, he knew that I had a degree in art education and teaching experience. So, you know, that was an easy thing for him to do while he wanted to work on his book extensively and and his dichromate business. So we worked together, and he made quite an impression when he went to Lake Forest in 1982. The whole studio of us went there. But before then, I'd like to cue up that photograph, Linda. This is Fred before he got his final book. What he has right there is the galley copy, which was used to make notations in before the final one goes. Now, I took this photograph. I put this on a tripod, and right outside the doors of Holographics. And in the background, you have Ron Rice, who was a technician of Fred's, and he was a fabricator, and was a great guy. And then behind him is Sherwin Chu. Sherwin helped out a lot. He helped Fred with his classes, and he was there as a administrative assistant. And he eventually took over the gallery or the studio after Fred went to New York or into Europe with Jeff Murray. And I can barely recognize myself over there on the far right. The three of us, and also who should be in the picture, would probably be Jim Farrow. The four of us worked with Fred, especially in shooting the dichromate holograms for his book. And in the foreground, you have Ed Lau, who is a Denver artist, and Fred would shoot rainbow holograms. Ed did installation pieces in Denver. He was very good at what he did. He did a lot of etched glass work, which is marvelous. And then, of course, you see Fred holding his book right there, very proud. Look at him. It's great. And there's Lloyd, you know, and Fred was so thrilled to have Lloyd come and visit, you know, because they worked together at the School of Holography, and they were great friends. And Lloyd was very proud of Fred too. Now, on the far left, as we're looking at it, there is somebody, that individual that Lloyd brought with him, and I have no idea who he is. And if there's anybody out there who recognizes him, let me know. Of course, we're going back about what, 40 some years. So So this is, you may not or may, but if you do, hit the chat button. All right. So after his successful book, he was at Lake Forest, and he was very well received. And he's, his book was published in the spring, Lake Forest in the winter or in summer, and after that, he made such an impression that he was offered the job of educational director at the Museum of Holography. And then he asked me to take over his studio, and keep the classes going and all the rest of it. And that was okay, and I did that, but it was short-lived because I got a phone call one day, and Fred said, hey, there's a big exhibition in Bath and and a great interest in England in holography, and they're looking for somebody to teach at Richmond Holographic Studios. Would you be interested? Sure, why not? He says, 6 months. I said, okay, well, why not do that? Well, I tell you what, 8 years later, I came back with a wife and 3 kids after spending all that time in England, and it was a great experience. And again, Fred ended up coming to Europe and coming to England, and that was great to meet up with him again. But as I was ready to leave the UK, I saw Graham Saxby and Martin Richardson, and at the time there was great interest at the Royal College of Art to set up a department there, and they encouraged me to apply for the position, and I did actually get the job at the RCA, and we had a great team. I had the good fortune of being able to convince Rob Monday to be our technical master, and he was a great artist in his own right. And if you look at his work, it's just incredible. He's really good. Also, we had Nick Phillips, and he came in, and he was a senior visiting lecturer from Loughborough. And he came in with great expertise, enthusiasm, and it was always good to see him. Added a real feature to the, to help to the unit. The group of students were very impressive. They came fully loaded. I mean, they were well equipped, and they all had bachelor's degrees, because the Royal College of Art was a graduate school. There were no undergraduates that attended. So all these students that came in were accomplished artists in their own right, and they were from various parts or various realms of the visual arts. So we had some who were graphic artists, some were fine artists, all coming together in this incredible place. The RCA was open to the community. We had visiting lecturers come in, and artists from England and outside of the UK, from America. We had Margaret Bennion, of course, was there, and Andy Pepper came in, and we had John Kaufman in the States, and Sally visited us, and she came in and gave a presentation, and of course, Fred was there, and it was great to see him come in and interact with the students. It was really pretty marvelous. And I have to say that the first student to graduate from the unit was Sue Cowles, and she was the first and the only student actually from the first class. And she really was a success. Her work and her degree show really did us proud in the unit, because from the walls of her degree show, the Royal Albert and Victoria and Albert Museum purchased some of the work. So that really gave the rest of the college to stand up and notice on that. It was very good. She did us very well. Well, you know, actually after 30 years, I'm still in contact with you know, with the students, so with many of the students that were in that class. Well, it was extraordinary times, and Fred was an extraordinary guy. I would say that my success that I had in holography can be directly related to him. He taught me how to teach it. He taught me holography, and he really enabled my career. So I am extremely grateful to Fred. You know, and one thing that Fred once said to me, and I've repeated this to my own kids and my students, is that he said, look, he said, you know, don't worry about being the first or the greatest. Worry about being most effective. Now, I'd like to look at the other image here. Now, this is a rainbow image that is dedicated to the memory of Fred and Becky. This is a rainbow hologram that I made and left out in the rain, and photographed it before it disappeared, as rainbow holograms will do, and if you put them in adverse circumstances. But this is to Fred and Becky, and somewhere they ride the rainbow, and their legacy lives on. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Peter. That was wonderful. And so nice to see this image dedicated to them. Great symbolic image.
Thank you.
So up next, we have Fernando Catapreta, and he is, well, I'll let him tell his story. Fernando, are you with us? We got your microphone on? Can't hear you.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes, now we can.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Thank you, Linda. And thank you to all my friends out there and that have been listening to this. This has been a lovely celebration of Fred and Becky. And I'm proud to be here as one of their friends. Linda, could you move to the second picture for me, please? Slide. Yeah, that one there. Okay. So I'd like to just share with you just a brief snapshot of my memories of Fred and Becky. I first met Fred at Holographics, where I also met my good friend Peter Miller, who just presented during a road trip to visit some holographic labs in that summer. I also met, of course, Sherwin Chu, who was awesome, and met Lloyd Cross at Two Limon Studios down the street, just a few miles down the road. And of course, I met Gary at his infamous Haight Street Gallery, which was also very good. So this, with meeting Fred for the first time, it was the beginning of a beautiful friendship. We ran into each other many times after that, including at various Lake Forest symposiums, as well as in New York during the summer of '83, I believe it was, when I was doing some work at Dan and Sam's New York Holographic Laboratories. So all throughout those years, our friendship grew, and Fred shared a lot of his life before holography, including his work with Ant Farm, the art performance activist group out of California. They, of course, were responsible for this iconic Cadillac Ranch installation, where a series of muscle cars were buried into a neat row, I think somewhere in a desert in Texas, if I'm not mistaken. And several years later, Fred and I got kind of a chuckle out of it when we saw that scene being represented in the Pixar animation Cars. So it was an interesting reincarnation of that piece. While working at the Muse in New York, that's how Fred would call it, he turned me on to the holographic paradigm related, musings of that time, which was a real eye opener for me, being the armchair psychologist that I am. And that's not to mention, of course, my dog-eared copy of the Holography handbook with me to this day, with dozens of photochemically stained pages written by Fred and Bob, masterfully illustrating and foreshadowing those long hours we would spend in laser labs all around the world. Lasers in the jungle somewhere. I'm happy to have been one of the thousands of people to have been gently guided by Fred. For my money, the Holography handbook is the best practical guide to holography ever written. Big fan here, big fan. I met Becky at Lake Forest holographic display exhibition held around the same time. She was a sweet, wise, and very engaging soul and a delight to converse with, and very intense, as Anna referenced earlier. I appreciated her work and I appreciated her calm energy. For me, this was Fred and Becky before they became Fred and Becky. A single word that stood for the multidimensional partnership that would blossom and bear several pieces of art, as both Augie and Anna has shared. Knowledge and sweet memories that they would create together all around the world. And this was said in one breath, Fred and Becky. The conferences at Lake Forest were always a very special affair for our holographic community. During the first exhibition, while all of us were working together to set up the show at the Duran building with Linda, it would all slowly come together as the artists bonded, helped each other, and formed lasting friendships. The 4-string quartet that played at the exhibition's opening, and I'm sure many of you will remember, seemed to herald an age for which holograms would be the perfect metaphor. Now, but my fondest memory of Fred and Becky was several years later when I got the opportunity to travel to Hamburg, where they had been working with Hanno at Holocom, a German laboratory, along with Volker Mirau, who was a very talented photoresist shooter who shot masters there for embossed holography. They also had a worked pulsed ruby laser. Now, the MOH was receiving submissions for an exhibition on pulsed holography. I had come up with a rather gruesome concept for submission, a self-portrait called Knife My Eye. We had a lot of fun trying to figure out what color paint would look most like red blood in the red light, and also in lieu of actually plunging a knife into my eye, which I was against that option. We decided to saw a kitchen knife down so the stub would look realistic as I held it between my blood-soaked fingers. Easier said than done. That operation alone took us a good hour and a half and several hacksaw blades to complete. But finally, I shot the piece to the H2 with Tom Svetkovich in his laboratory in Ohio, submitted it to the Muse, but it was ultimately rejected. Maybe too much of shock value, or a little too close to the eye slicing scene from Un Chien Andalou by Buñuel. Anyway, but the main thing that I wanted to share with you today is just one little souvenir that I got, and Linda, you can go to the next slide. It was a pulsed shot that I took later of the day. It really was a snapshot of the four of us pictured here. Fred, Volker, Becky, and I. It remained a perfectly frozen moment in time. A 3D memory of all of us happy, smiling together, alive and well. No artistic objective other than creating a holographic snapshot of the four of us at that point in time, encased in amber, worth a million words. So to Fred and Becky, thanks for the memories, guys.
Thank you so much, Fernando. I have to let you all know, though, we've still got several speakers and we're already into our last 30 minutes. So I'm going to have to ask those of you that have got a lot of slides, if you could move through them fairly quickly and try to keep yourselves to about 5 minutes right now so that we don't run over too long. So next of all, we've got Jim Trollinger. And Jim, if you can unmute your microphone. And there you
All
go.
right.
Hi, Jim.
Thank you, Linda, for letting me be part of this group. Fred and my friendship have a very important role in my life, and it's really good to be here together with all many of his other friends. I met Fred the first time a couple of years after his handbook of holography came out. I had reviewed that book for Applied Optics, so I knew a lot about Fred before we actually met. Both of us were invited to play a role in a lecture series in Bogota, Colombia. And our first meeting, we were boarding, unbeknownst to us, we were boarding the same Avianca flight to Bogota. And I was standing in line waiting on boarding, standing right behind him. And he looked around at me, and that started an instant friendship that lasted forever. It turns out we were seated together. We became friends. We had interesting conversations and enjoyed several different times in Bogota at the University of Bogota. Not long after that, he joined our company to work on several holography projects. And that's when I met Becky. They all became part of our company family. I worked on several different interesting projects with Fred. Maybe the most interesting was a company in Las Vegas had funded us to develop a holographic poker token that would help prevent counterfeiting. And we developed a poker chip that had an annular hologram that, regardless of how you put it in the machine, the hologram, when it was lit up, it would throw a beam over to a detector that would allow it to pass and would validate the token. The company loved it, and they were just ready to install it and start into production when credit cards, the machines were converted to credit cards. So the poker token never became a thing in Las Vegas. I have a few slides here that just show, I'll run through very quickly. Here we are. We met many times after that at various conferences. Here we are at a conference in St. Aphus, Wales. Here's Fred on the left-hand end. We all dressed for a big ball as medieval people. Fred here is a monk. The next slide shows he and I together. I was a peasant and he was the monk. I mean, we had a good time at that conference and many others like it. The next slide is a shot of Becky. As I say, Becky and Fred, people loved him. I mean, he was sort of a mystical, very interesting guy. And so the people in the company all loved he and Becky both. Here we are at a birthday party. The next slide shows Fred joining us. This is my wife, Pauline Abbott. She was also a very good friend of Becky. Next slide is him with his birthday. I think this may have been his 50th birthday. It was around 50. Next slide is his and blowing the candles out. The next slide, as I said, in Colombia, we made a lot of friends there. Fred had already known some people, some of the artists. Here we are, Fred on the right-hand side, and myself and other artist friends that we met and worked with in Bogota. The next slide shows he with two of his friends. Both of these are artists. The next slide is just another picture of Fred I thought was interesting. So I will miss Fred, knowing that Fred's around So it's been nice to meet the other people who are friends of Fred, and I'll end it there.
Thank you so much, Jim. That was, you showed another part of his life in terms of his travel, because he really did travel a lot. So next up, Jim Farrow and Pam Peck. I find your screen here and get your microphone on.
Oh, yeah. Hi, everybody. You hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great seeing all these faces. I'll try to be brief here. I got interested in holography when I was at the University of Washington, Seattle, studying for my master's degree. And I read about it and wanted to incorporate holography into my sculpture and photography, which I ended up doing. But the nearest place for me to come to was the Bay Area. So I contacted Sharon McCormick at the School of Holography on Shotwell Street and Fred at Holographics. And I didn't hear anything from Sharon, and Sherwin Chu invited me to come on down from the Seattle area. So I came on down, didn't know a single person, had no place to stay. First place I went to was the front door of Emeryville Artist Co-op, where Holographics was, and met Fred and the whole crew. This was in the fall of '79. And I had a great time there, taking the holographic classes, and still didn't know what my immediate future was going to be, but I loved the Bay Area, and they offered me a job at Dichromate Inc. So I worked there for another year and a half, and anyway, got way more immersed in holography than I ever thought I would. But everybody's really covered all the great things about Fred, and I would ditto all that stuff. But he was just really inspirational. It was just talking with him, and it just got you charged up and wanted you to try things and do things. Later on, I ended up working in Copenhagen, Denmark, helping a group there to make photoresist holograms. At the same time, Fred and Becky were in Hamburg, Germany, doing a similar thing. And I would visit them often because I was only one block from the train station. It took me about 3 hours to get to Hamburg. And we had some great adventures there. And later on, Pam and I traveled with Fred and Becky throughout Europe. So I'm just really grateful for running into Fred, and just changed, as Peter has similar feelings. Peter just changed me forever, and my outlook on art making and all kinds of other things.
Well, thank you, Jim. So many friends of Fred's from all over the world.
Yeah, great seeing everybody.
Thank you. Next up, we have John Perry. And if we can make sure your microphone is unmuted. I'm trying to find your window right now. Are you still with us, John? I think we might have lost John. In the event that we did, I have one image that we put in here that Augie had found. Augie, if you wanted to just speak a moment about this image. Your microphone's off.
I've been going through a lot of Fred's masters and you know, have run across many masters of friends who came to visit him. And Barbara and John Perry came to visit him at some point in Hamburg. And I just thought this was a delightful image of the two of them with these bubbles floating around in space.
Thank you. So we'll move
I want
on.
to see some of these holograms firsthand somehow, with illuminated with laser light, please. Right, there's a huge box.
Well, I think there's an exhibition due here. So next up is Craig. Craig and Sally are together. So I'm sharing a screen here, and I'll let you two take it away.
Thank you. It's wonderful to have this opportunity. It's wonderful to have this opportunity to reminisce about Fred and Becky. And as Fernando said, Fred and Becky is a single word, and it's been that way for us as long as we've known them.
Yeah, I guess I first met Fred at the First Lake Forest. If Linda, you could put that first picture up. There you go. Fred Becky. And, you know, Becky wasn't at the first one. This might have been in '85. Fred was at the first one. And here he is teaching in the next slide. And, you know, I don't know, we all became just really close friends, and it didn't matter. I was still in Boston at the time, and so would go down to New York and see them. I had taken Lightscape out to the First Lake Forest and shown that it was the landscape sculpture made with diffraction gratings, which I sort of primarily worked with that and hose. And, you know, Fred was just really supportive. And I did an AIR not too long after that. And probably that was about when I met Becky in New York. Let's see, let's go to the next.
This picture is from roughly, I believe, '86. Chris Outwater at the center and we started a company called Advanced Dimensional Displays. And in this picture, you see Bob Hess, and then Fred, then Chris, and Vince DiBiase, who I should mention has had a heart attack a day or so ago, and I just saw this this morning, and he's due for surgery like right away. So we're hoping the best for Vince. And then on the far right is Ed Wesley. And I think I met Fred first in the '85 at Lake Forest. And so this picture, that was a picture related to a studio visit related to the SPIE conference in LA.
And this is another shot, sorry, it's out of focus, but there we are, of Becky, and just glowing. And that's the way she was. I mean, the two of them together were a force, and individually they were a force. So I think that's why we always say Fred and Becky, or Becky and Fred. It's they were more than just a package. Linda's moving me right on here.
I'm sorry, that was an accident.
That's okay.
Oh, that's okay. I took it as a hint. This is not as good a picture as Ana showed earlier of Venus, and it was one of the first pieces I saw of Becky's and knocked me over. Usually in the traditions of the art world, Venuses were always done by men. So to have a woman's interpretation of Venus and have one so powerful at just a point when we needed that, especially as women were starting to do artwork and holography, it was kind of a binding factor. I think we all felt that Becky was really a shining light as an artist in the field, as well as Fred, but their trajectories were really quite different. And yet together there was sort of a bonding nature, as Ana and Augie have already talked about. Okay, you can go on. Thank you. This was another one called Atomic that was at a show we did up in, I think it was in Canada at Interference. And what was wonderful about this, again, it was a small reflection hologram, but as it was mounted on those springs, it would wiggle. And so as you moved was one thing, and then it would wiggle as well. And that was the way Becky thought, you know, how movement and how atomic network, thank you, Ana, and how the integration of concept and work came together, which was really important, not only to Becky, but to a lot of us in the arts. Then the next is a fuzzy picture of Fred behind one of his mandalas. And Augie's already shown us some beautiful pictures of the earlier mandalas. And the next, this might have been one that he showed as well. I wish I'd seen more of these in person. I only saw some of them in person. They should have all been sold. They were fabulous. They are fabulous.
They are fabulous.
Okay, and the next,
I can talk a
you
little
can
bit.
talk about this one.
This is a calendar that was produced in Germany while Fred and Becky were working. And what is it? Is that Holocom? Is that correct? And we're a little unclear on who did what on all these holograms, but Fred was involved with shooting, I believe, pulse masters, which were then they created embossed holograms for this calendar. It's a huge calendar. That vertical, so that's like a 6x6 hologram in the center with a photo of the piece below. And each page of this, go ahead and go to the next slide. Each page had a different hologram for each month.
And this was from that was from a fossil. This is a feather, obviously. And the last one that we have is a crystal. And what was beautiful about this calendar is each page had either an embossed image or a photograph or a drawing associated. So there was a different media of the same image on each page. And it's kind of a universal calendar because it's not set up with Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday kind of thing, just the numbers.
Yeah, it wasn't a real useful calendar, but it was a beautiful, beautiful calendar. And the company was Xander's. So somebody else might be able to fill in some blanks on the work. But I wanted to mention that one thing is that I know some of the these were pulse masters in some cases, and making a hologram that you have to make in blue light from a red hologram is pretty challenging. So I'll leave it at that for people who understand what that means. Next.
Oh, and this was a fun photo. Craig has a camera that takes a picture in a circle. And so this is one of our dinners. And I wanted to bring up one comment, which I'm sure everybody who knew them would know, is that whenever you went to a restaurant and were spending time with Fred, always a pen would come out and there would be a drawing on a napkin, some kind of a setup, something would happen. And there was always that kind of interaction. And that's one of my fondest memories of them is this ongoing creative force that was just exuberant. And it's that way I hold them in my heart.
Absolutely.
Oh, and this is, I guess.
No, it's.
Oh, all right. Well, I'll keep going. Anna showed some of these. So these are repeats.
So I'll flip through them quickly then.
Yeah. These are actually some shots that Anna and I were sharing. This is Becky and Melissa looking at Roto. And so that's the scale, and maybe other versions, other installations of these pieces.
Right. Well, thank you. Thank you
Sure.
so much.
And it's so lovely to see everyone and such a wonderful, exhibition of all that they did and all they contributed to us individually and as friends and in the field.
Thank you. So moving along here, we're getting crunched on time. It's now 2:53. But Michael Crawford, we'll probably run over a bit.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Yes.
Very good. Strap on and get ready to cross your eyes. I'm very thankful to be included today. I just heard in the last 2 days, we're including Becky, and I am so thankful for her friendship and her bon mots, and I regret not drawing more from Fred and Becky's experience and love. I'm thankful for the time I did have. This is a picture of Fred in Wales. I'm going to talk about two areas: the symposium, the ISDH in both Lake Forest and in Europe, and also time here in Santa Fe. So the next slide, I want to give credit to Mark Diamond, the photographer. If it's a 3D picture and not a Polaroid or something I took, then Mark Diamond probably took this picture. so here we go, Lake Forest. There was the Eagle Feather exhibition in '77. That's when I learned about holography. It took me several years to find this community. So I lived with these characters like Emmett Leith and Steve Benton, founders and inventors in this field. Next slide. Marie-Andrée Cassette, one of the many amazing women. There's hordes and wonderments of women artists in this field. Next slide, this guy, Augie Muth, who I met then, and then Fred here. And if we pause here for just a second, this was where I found my community. This was Fred and Augie, and these artists I started hanging out with were where I found my home and found what I've been doing with natural light and lasers and natural objects, found appreciation here. I'm so very thankful for that. The next slide. Then there was there was two symposia in Europe. This is in Wales. That's Martina and Fred, a great Mark Diamond shot. And then of course Wales. You've seen some of these. The next three. This is TJ with Francesco Mazzaro behind. The next slide. Francesco Mazzaro, a crucial component here at the Light Foundry. Next slide. That's me at the time. Next slide. And this, of course, you've seen this. So I thought this would be a surprise, but I'm glad to see it. This piece, this mandala, was a real springboard to my work, that I had been doing work with natural objects in laser light. And I loved seeing that particular piece was a huge springboard to what I'm continue doing. And it really showed me about dichromate as a medium. So what I'm doing now, encapsulating laser light with its interaction with natural objects. And that takes us to Santa Fe, I've been coming in about that time. Fred and Becky moved in 2007, and I've been here between 3 and 15 times a year since then, doing my work here at the lab, at the studio. And Fred has been a constant companion throughout that, for meals, for consultations, for talks. That's him looking at one of my opal pieces. Next slide. This was an impromptu gathering of artists, a tiny symposia earlier in the year. But I wanted to show the great interaction between my great friend Augie Muth and his mentor Fred. This was just a few months ago. This was 2012, those same two characters. So I think I'm doing pretty good on time so far. Next slide. I'm so thankful for Fred, and the more time I spent with him, please cross your eyes. This is a 3D picture done by Mark Diamond. I'm so thankful for his influence in my life. And as I spent more time with, I realized that we need to offload some of this. So I have documented hours and hours of his lectures, his talking on video footage and audio recordings, and especially recently about his time with the ant farm in California. And with Jack Massing, who was also involved. The next slide. So you can cross your eyes and enjoy this mandala in 3D. I can tell you that through this time spending, we became more and more confidants, and especially with his loss of his life partner, Rebecca, and the loss of my wife, Sarah, 3 years ago, that shared experience of human experience, which is unmatched and only known by those who know it, brought us together as we began to deal with our grief and how to navigate, both the freedom and the loneliness that comes from that time. So the next slide. This is what I'm about to say is probably at odds with it, but go ahead, cross your eyes and see. I think of this as a wizard. Really, I think of this as a wizard, not a monk. And I would say all discussions of Fred only become complete when you mention his appreciation of the human female form, whether it's photographic or in movies, whether it's holographic, or whether it's conceptual or just walking on the earth. I'm thankful for Fred. I'm thankful for his friendship. I hope I did well with my time, and I am so thankful for everyone here and their words and what I've learned. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. You did really well, and really nice to see these images and to hear your experiences with Fred.
Thank you.
So moving along, we've got Pearl John with us from England, and if we can, you've got your microphone on, Pearl. I'll turn it up to you.
Hello, it's
It's very moving to be here and listen to this wonderful description of Fred and Becky's life and work. And I'm grateful. I'll only be very, very brief. I think I owe my career today to Fred and Becky. It's so influential. And that started by, I was one of the 6,000 people who bought the book, the Holography Handbook, and Peter Miller was there the first day I made a hologram, and I bought the book straight after, and that was in the early 80s. What the book did for me, and Fred's attitude when I met him, was to remove barriers to the technology for me. So I made my sand table when I was, I think I was about 16, a teenager anyway, when I made it. And he managed the book. It wasn't scary. Suddenly it was accessible, and I was extremely grateful for that. Otherwise, it could have been a very intimidating technology to get involved with. But when I finally met Fred when I was a Royal College of Art student in the early 90s, my favourite memory is of Fred chairing the art forum, which he did. Trying to corral people to keep to time when talking about their work. What I really had as a youngster was an invitation to the party, and a real an understanding that this was they were so dedicated, Fred and Becky, that this was going to be a lifelong commitment to this medium, and so I'm incredibly grateful for their warmth, intelligence, enthusiasm, their spirituality, and I gave a talk at one of the forums on making mandalas with school children, holographic mandalas. And I was invited by Neil Miller of the Columbia Career Center to apply for a job teaching. And I was very uncertain about this. So remember talking to Becky, and she talked me into it. She said that TJ was supportive of the Career Center and I should really consider it. So I applied, got the job, and stayed for 5 years. And then on leaving, I recommended Fred as the teacher at the Career Center. And it wasn't an easy job. I think that the Career Center really benefited. They got 2 for 1 because I think it was not an easy situation for Fred to do the kind of teaching that course demanded with his dyslexia. And I know that Becky was very, very supportive of in the process for doing that, for doing all the administration, all the paperwork that it demanded. But I'm so glad to hear that they did a good exhibition while they were at Columbia, because I was worried that I'd sort of set them up for a difficult situation at the Career Center when I left. But I'm glad that they ended up in Santa Fe and was so well supported by Anna and Oggy. I think that's all I wanted to say, really. That Fred's attitude, that simplicity, that kiss, that keep it simple, and attitude in the book, and the welcoming warmth, and that invite to be part of holography community. I just remember being
just struck by, oh my goodness, this is what it feels like to be in an art movement. That, you know, there are your impressionists and your and here we are, the holographers. You know, I really felt that there was it was an exciting community to belong to, and that was down to Becky's incredible intellect and Fred's warmth and spirituality. So I am, you know, it's delightful to hear more about them, and I'm very, very grateful and lucky to have met them. So thank you.
Well, thank you for being with us, Pearl, and sharing that. We had another speaker who was going to be with us but is not joining us after all. I just wanted to mention her, and Sabina, who had been a caregiver for Fred and Becky during their later years in their ill health. And I think Becky had also helped her in learning to, she was German or is German and would like to speak, helped her to learn to speak English. And we're going to finish up now with C. Alex Clark, who worked with Fred and Augie's studio. And these are some more recent images. So C, if your microphone is queued up.
Hello. Sure, yeah, you could just go ahead and go to the first slide there. I knew Fred, you know, and Becky since like 2014, 15. So only just a few short years, but we got pretty close, you know, doing both art projects and practical things like organizing and cleaning and arranging and you know, holograms and papers and Becky's jewelry. I spent some time with her doing that. And so this was, you know, just this last exhibition we all had together, this last piece that Fred made. You can go ahead and go to the next slide there. You know, he was always interested in new technology, and I helped him out a lot getting this 3D printing thing going. You know, he up even to the last few weeks and days, he always had new projects in mind and wanted to learn new things. And so yeah, you could go ahead and go to the next one there. This was just recently cleaning out the storage unit, found this reflection hologram of Fred and Becky together. And I thought that was really sweet. And go ahead and go, yeah, there's, so back when I first started working with Augie and Fred, we made a meter long hologram with Augie, and there's Fred and I posing in front of it, proud of our work. And go ahead and go to the next one there. You know, this is one of the first holograms that I saw working in the studio, and Fred was always so proud of this one, and it's definitely an inspiration for me and makes me think about how he thought and, you know, moved through the world. And go ahead and go to the next one there. And this is just Fred looking through one of his holograms with some diffraction on him there. And I've got a little piece of diffraction grating he gave me as my practical effects here. Just a happy moment there in the studio. And go ahead and go to the next one. There's Fred drawing some circles, Enso, for one of the pieces he did with the figures. We did some sandblasting of the circle on there, and that was a really nice day. Go ahead and go to the next one. So here's, and we can just leave it on this one. Just Fred and Becky together looking through a hologram that we made at the studio. And just to wrap up, I wanted to, a book that they had lent me, read a small passage from this book that they lent me, the Rainbow book that I now I got as my piece of their library that I'm carrying on. But so in this part about the metaphysics of light, the metaphysics of color, it kind of goes through the meanings of the colors of the spectrum. And then the last one is violet, and it says, violet reintroduces red into the blue of the spiritual world, and warmth flushes into the heart of the seeker. Understanding grows into wisdom. Finally comes death, the disappearance of color at the end of the spectrum, but not death, perhaps, for the colors have not died. They have just gone beyond our apparent ability to see them, but that they exist still and carry on at frequencies quite related to, though much higher than the frequencies we see, is becoming more and more an apparent fact. Indeed, there's considerable speculation that we are seeing higher up the spectrum all the time, and auras or other higher frequency relatives to the color spectrum, as well as theories relating to harmonies. So that's just kind of how I think of Fred and Becky as moving up the color spectrum ahead of us. So thanks for having me. Yeah, it's great to see everyone.
Thank you so much, Steve. That was really a beautiful ending to all of these amazing memories that we've shared today. And I would like to just add one thing that I was talking with Fred, and this would have been last spring, and we began discussing doing a seminar with him about all of his work, and which he was really enthusiastic about doing. And particularly he wanted to share about his theories of a holographic universe and more of the spiritual aspects of his work in holography. But sadly, his body gave out before we could do this. And this event today was a result of not being able to do that last spring. And I'm very grateful to everybody that has participated with us today to bring all these memories together. And as Gary said, this is going to go into the archive of the Virtual Museum of Holography. There are currently 2 seminar recordings from earlier this year that are up there. This will be number 3. And it's the beginning of the opening of the doorway for us recording our history. And I hope there will be many more seminars that we will do like this, and events that will go into recording our holographic history. We have one more thing left to do, and this is a new experience for me. We've been running a raffle of one of Augie's holograms, and we've raised somewhere in the order, and I haven't looked at it today, but probably around about $2,500 for the benefit of the HoloCenter and the Virtual Museum of Holography. And I am going to attempt to do the drawing right now. And so I have to switch screens for myself, although you'll probably still continue to see me here. But I'm now going to go to here we go, this one. So this is Rally Up, where we held the raffle. The time has ended, and they tell me that there should be a button here that I will push to do the drawing. And here's, but it's not, I'm not seeing it. Does this tell me? We raised $2,753, and where is this button? Well, I'm going to have to do some. I'm sorry, they assured me that it would be very obvious, and I don't seem to find it. I will push the button, and I'll put a notice out to all of you that will tell you who won the actual raffle itself. And as I get back to my other screen, which has disappeared on me now too, I say thank you to all of you. I'm so grateful to all of you being present here. I'm going to stop my share here. And so here we go, all the screens again. Thank you, all of you. This has been a totally wonderful afternoon. And thank you for all of your memories. And I look forward to seeing you at the next seminar.
Thank you, Linda. Incredible work. You've done, Linda.
Thank you, Linda. Wonderful.
Thank you,
Wonderful
Linda.
to see everybody.
Great memories from everybody. Beautiful.
Thank you, Linda.
Thank you so much.
Superb work, Linda. Take care.
See you all again soon.